had different times when I've been engaged on consulting gigs that have taken me out of town for quite a while. So I've missed a few periods, but been here the last couple months for sure. So anyway, it's the topic customer input to Agile teams, like breathing. We'll get to that. I have pulled in my longtime colleague, we won't say how long, Matt Wilson, who is SVP of Sales at Teliax. And Matt, can you share a bit of your background? Everybody can look him up on, at the Teliax bio, but feel free to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. So I've known Cynthia for quite a while. I've been in telecom for 25 years. So obviously I started when I was about 5. But the first half of my career, I was in product management, product development. So I'm a different sales leader that have a background in product, building products, rolling out products, writing product requirements, etc. And the last 8 years been on the sales side, and we work closely with product management. Our company now has an agile development process, so very engaged in speaking with product management, developers, etc., and kind of feeding those customer requirements into the process, and then seeing what comes out at the end of those sprints. So Cynthia and I were talking a few weeks ago, and she brought this up, and I said, sure, I'd like to participate and provide some input.
Yeah, so we started working together when I had one of the largest market research budgets of my career. I had the responsibility I had about a $3 million market research budget at the time for a startup division at Sprint. And we did a lot of competitive intelligence. We did primary research, and it was feeding directly into new product development for broadband services. And a lot around applications and the capacity that was going to be needed for all of the photos and video and all of the technology products that were going to reside on our networks. And we looked at all market segments at that time. Starting out early in my career, real quickly on my end, started in marketing, fell in love with product development teams and said, I gotta get to product development. And so I went over to IT for a time and worked in user experience, user requirements, did those, work till 2 a.m, nights, reviewing all sorts of invoices, requirements, testing, all of that, and then moved into product development leadership for very large development efforts. And since then, through my career, I've sought to be a partner to development teams and Agile. I'm a huge fan of Agile, not just a fan, but an advocate and practitioner. So I've got both my CSM and CSPO for about 7 years now, and just seek to be a partner to everybody. So I will share my screen.
And let me know if you want me to kick off the poll.
Yeah, let's go ahead, please.
You want to do that? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to launch it here. Let's see what happens.
I got it.
Hopefully everybody can answer. Yeah, getting some answers.
Great, yeah. So step 1, if we're doing a session on customer input, let's find out who's in our audience tonight.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we have 1 remaining, and that might be me. So, and I'm a coach. So there you go.
Right, terrific. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is terrific. Actually, really happy to see so many Scrum Masters and coaches here tonight, because you're really the ones that, when it comes to customer input, well, and I guess I didn't answer it either. So there we go. So starting in, at the end of a day where people have been on Zoom calls, I just thought, team picture And the title tonight was Customer Input to Agile Teams Like Breathing. Well, breathing isn't always easy. And so this from A League of Their Own, of course it's hard, it's supposed to be hard. But one of the uses of this was by a CTO that Matt and I worked for at Intrado. Some of you may have run into Stephen, but he would use this phrase to tell us, do the work, do the competitive analysis, do the heavy lifting, do the customer work. That it's not always easy to know what to say to customers. You're worried about, will you stumble? Will you say something wrong? But you know, truly throughout my career anyway, when you do the hard work, when you do the analysis, when you talk to customers, that's where the magic happens. You bring it back to the teams are part of it, and you really can end up winning. Okay, so we're going to talk value. So I put a few symbols on here, right? So value is dollars, but I also thought, okay, let's put a peace sign down there, because at the end of the day, if you deliver products that customers purchase and repurchase and refer, and your software is working and the teams are cranking out great work, that is an awesome place to be. And so that largely starts with focusing on value. So we'll talk a lot about value and bringing that into teams this evening. So we'll do a little touch on Scrum and SAFe, the Manifesto. We'll talk about the roles of the product owners, analysts, business analysts if it's SAFe. We'll talk customer types a little bit, some research. We can get into CX and UX a little bit at the end, but when we're talking customer input to Agile teams, I'm not sure that has to be at the center, but I'm absolutely willing to have a discussion. And yeah, at the end of the day, successful solutions that meet customer needs are fun and even peaceful. And Nancy, that was kind of for you.
Thank you.
All right. So at the end of the day, this is, you know, the Scrum framework. I just thought I'd put this here right away, maybe put everybody at ease. We're all in the right place. And if you are following SAFe, we'll just picture the SAFe trains and picture customer input coming in all along the train. But this reminds us, we have all these stakeholders up here, and then we have the product owner over here. And Matt, do you want to jump in and kind of share a perspective on kind of that process of feeding into the team from kind of where you've seen that?
Yeah, I mean, what we see is when we go out, our organization is very solution oriented. Meaning when we talk to customers, we'll sit down and understand their specific requirements for any project or any specific communications solution that they're looking for. And so we'll, from a sales team perspective, and again, having a product management background, you know, we try to define those use cases and understand exactly what's the customer looking for. We'll then take those use cases back to our product management team and work closely with them to understand what development has to be done, and you know, the cost, the timing of that development. And so we work hand in hand with our customers to feed that into product management and then see what comes back. And we're not afraid to tell our customers no, like, hey, that's out of our wheelhouse. That's going to take too long. We don't see a value in those in developing that feature, that functionality, because we can't really monetize it.
And again, we'll come back to our framework, but just a quick call out to the manifesto, talking about customer collaboration. So going back a few years ago, and just if anybody can answer the question. I guess we mentioned it during the anniversary, but for those, if anybody remembers the year the manifesto came out and maybe the month.
Ooh.
Feel
Challenge.
free to put it in the chat. It's good to know when this has been around. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is Scrum has actually, Scrum has been around since the 80s conceptually. So it predates the manifesto and was, at one point considered the new product development method. So customer collaboration over, I'm going to go over contract negotiation. This idea that you're working and collaborating so closely with your customers that you're negotiating, they're happy, you're talking value all the time. If you don't need a contract, you're actually talking value and they're involved in your development and speaking possibly directly to your development teams at different times. So what are these product owners doing? So this is a model. It's an academic model, but I updated it quite a while ago because the model didn't have this customer ring in it. So it's a pretty traditional model of this is what product owners and product managers are doing every day. Looking at what's changing in regulations, what's changing politically, what might shut down a market, what's happening with technology, all this social, y'all can read. And then you've got the 4 Ps and the 5 Cs. And really what makes this come to life is interacting with customers all the time. Oh, what's this a picture of?
Waterfall.
Waterfall. Oh no, I mentioned waterfall. So everybody knows who's been around for a while that even the waterfall methods, the best ones were, that I'm, proud to have been a part of some launches where we accelerated even in a waterfall model because it was customer oriented all along the way. And if you've got a long project or you're taking multiple sprints to get to an MVP, you sure better be interacting with customers all along the way. So this is a beautiful waterfall. So I thought I'd go right into, the ways that customer input can work regardless of the development method. Okay, so I'll go through this quickly, and then Matt, with your experience in product management, this gets deep into like for an existing product, but maybe we can talk a little bit about product development. And then I'd love to open it up to everybody here, small group. I'd really love to hear from people of what's worked for you in gathering feedback. We can do that here. We can do that in a couple slides, but I just want to tee that up to be thinking about your good examples and maybe some tough examples where you didn't get enough input and it didn't work, if you'd be comfortable sharing that with the team. So here is a Jira product manager on their blog said, for him, it's a 3-step process. Get the customer's feedback on their experience with the product, document that feedback in one place. I thought that was a very specific and helpful recommendation. It's one thing to say, oh, I'm going to talk to customers all the time, but then what do you do with that feedback? Put that feedback, document it in one place. Thought that was very solid. Move customer feedback into a backlog. So, that is, the piece, and it needs to come in. And then always seeking to understand value. And this is something Matt and I talked about. So Matt, I'll turn this over to you to talk about maybe a few of the ins and outs of defining value.
Sure. And I think it really comes, Cynthia had a conversation and it's kind of been ongoing. There's really there's two pieces of this equation. And I see it every day in our business. There's really internal customers and external customers, and value gets created on both sides of that equation. And so you have to be mindful of that in each scenario. I can give an example. With what we have an existing customer, they're using our communications products, and they came to us, and just in the course of normal account management, they mentioned a feature that we don't have. We could build it, etc. And so we got into a dialogue with them about how we could add an additional feature from a sales perspective. We could upsell them, do more business with them, and then we ran that through the normal, our normal process of product management or detailing requirements, putting in the sprint, etc. And that helped us grow our business. On the other side of the equation, if you look at what sales could be doing when we're out, growing the business and adding value to the business, that can inherently cause internal problems, and your operations teams feed into the product management process or the agile process to say, hey, we're seeing these problems because we're growing our customer base so much because we've added this feature functionality. You now need to go do some development to make this internal system better, faster. And so there might not be any intrinsic monetization of it from hey, I sold something, we get more revenue, but there could be an OpEx impact of, hey, we're having to expend a lot of internal resources to do this because we're growing the business in some way, shape, or form. And we need to improve an internal system so we can use less people or, save OpEx, something like that. So I think there's really two sides of that value equation you have to consider when you're looking at developing features or functionality. Is it internal to help OpEx, or is it sell a new product? So these are things that I'm seeing every day. We're really in a growth mode, and we're adding a lot of customers, and these conversations are going on regularly.
So, and Katie was gonna, encourage people to raise their hands or comment in the chat. I wanted to reinforce that. I see somebody raise their hand.
Yeah, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Thanks a lot. It was a great presentation, Cynthia and Matt. My question is, while the Agile team, while they are building a product in an iteration for 10 days, if the product owner is responsible to face off the customer, he is supposed to get the customer feedback at least 10 times in iteration every day, because he attends daily sync up meeting. Every time he attends daily sync up meeting, get the inspect and adopt. 10 times, is it possible to get the feedback from the consumers, the end users, share it back with the Agile team so that the built-in quality is taken care?
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. It depends on the type of market segment you have, right? So if you're only working with a few customers, or is your situation, do you have a mass market? Do you have a lot of customers?
Yes.
So there should be feedback method. I'll jump down here a little bit. We'll just dive into some research. Typically, when it comes to research method, ongoing customer panels, that would be a lot of high-end B2B, but it works in consumer. It really works in any market segment. Small business, if you're targeting a vertical like manufacturing, if you're targeting software developers as a target audience for your development services. Panels, I think, and Matt may emphasize that it's really proven, and it's probably the best way that you have customers that are such strong advocates, or at least use your product enough that they care, that they want to provide input either monthly or quarterly or semi-annually. And then a lot of these are all going to be, it depends. So to your question, the should somebody bring customer feedback in every day of a sprint? I'm interested in what other people say. I would say no, not during a sprint. That could be distracting. You want, in fact, one of the a lot of recommendations are to have your sprint review and then have a sprint review with customers occasionally.
Cynthia,
Yeah.
that's more the model we use. We don't get customer feedback every day. We have certain checkpoints along the way where we will get that feedback. And then to echo what you said, we do things like customer advisory boards, pre-COVID, quarterly, annually, bring your top customers or partners together. If you have partners who are taking your technology and incorporating it into something they sell, and get their feedback. And I've done that successfully in several different companies, and incorporating that feedback to set, long-term roadmaps and short-term roadmaps.
Did that answer your question well enough? I think in some software environments, you're getting, you can get they're getting customer feedback every minute, right? Through transaction, through digital feedback, through your CRM and other, best practices. You're getting constant feedback, ratings, scores, and problems reported. And it depends on what kind of development team you're on. If you're on a troubleshooting team or another type of dev team, how quickly you have to respond to that sort of customer input. If you're dealing with customer problems, if you're on that team, then yeah, you're probably interacting with customers almost every day. I know my brother-in-law lives in that world. Do you want to share any more about your environment, or did that answer it?
Yes, Cynthia, your points really make sense to me. But my concern here is like, if the product owner not able to bring in the feedback of the consumer on a daily basis, how to bake in the built-in quality? Otherwise, I wait for 10 days, finished product, and give a demo. My consumer's client says, no, this is not, I do not want. I want something else. To avoid that wastage, if it makes sense to get in at least a few consumers, the end users, this is what I want, this is what I want, at least 50%. So finished product cannot be given demo, they might get rejected. So that is where I am coming from. How quickly we can bake in the built-in quality on a daily basis, wherever it is possible to some extent.
Oh, thank you for clarifying. It sounds to me, and I don't know, it's somebody else. This is a meetup, and we're challenged in Zoom. If we were all in the room in Boulder, right, we would be exchanging other thoughts. But it sounds like user experience help as well. Katie, do you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, and I don't know, this may be very basic, so I apologize, but like before starting, I was going to speak to the product side, I wasn't going to speak to the customer, but rather, sorry, let me start over. Okay, so before starting a sprint, we usually review the sprint priority with them. And then at the end of the sprint, we do a sprint review or a sprint demo for the customer. But in the middle of the sprint, we do like a kind of like what we call a desk check, where they just kind of, we do an informal mid-sprint demo of like where we're going, what we've completed, and they're able to give input on the exact items that we're doing. So we don't, it's just minor tweaks. We don't like entirely redo something. If they want to entirely redo something, then we would push it to another sprint. I don't know if that helps.
But if you use, yeah, so sorry for interrupting you, sorry.
No, please go right ahead.
Yeah, but if you are using the behavior-driven development and the definition of done, the behavior-driven development to automate user acceptance testing on a daily basis, definition of done to be verified on a daily basis. If I'm implementing, we are doing behavior-driven development, definition of done. So then the user acceptance testing to be done on the day one, the very first hour of every day. Can you please clarify on that point, please?
I'm just curious, Cynthia, should we save that until maybe later in the presentation, or I'm just wondering if that's on?
Well, we wanted it to be collaborative, and I think it's an interesting challenge that highlights a few things. I mean, I love that in this conversation, thank you for bringing up the question initially, and then Katie, like the desk check, that's, you know, maybe not an official term, but a midpoint desk check. Or if what you're saying is that you need input every day, it sounds like your situation could be fairly unique. And we have some really good coaches on the call here today, Nancy, Katie, others, and I'd be happy to talk with you further as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but you took the words out of my mouth when you said definition of done. I was going to come back to that and say, okay, so it sounds like in the stories, the acceptance criteria for accepting that story that is very customer facing needs to have additional validation while writing the story. So you might go back to, you know, our invest acronym and or other things for best practices around writing user stories is one thought. Okay, so let's back up.
Sure.
So back to talking value a little bit, we touched on external customer value and internal customer value monetization. So bringing customer input to Agile teams. Coming back to our theme here, you know, can it be monetized? This is a little bit what Matt was talking about. You know, so there's a couple different ways you can monetize it. And Matt, I'll turn this over to you in a minute, maybe for total cost of ownership from the customer standpoint or whatever. But there, you know, you can look at total customer value or lifetime value of customers. It doesn't, proving out the cost of a feature doesn't have to necessarily get proven out in that version of the software. That customer might be purchasing, you know, 5 different products from you or services. And so, or that that segment of customers. So sometimes you can do one-off features for customers because they're so big. And it's worth it, and somebody's run the numbers. But you do have to do your return on investment. That's what the product owner is working with the product management team, usually with finance, to help with those story points, right? And I'd like to pause on this point because I'm really kind of curious how others, how you are determining value and story points, and whether, you know, it's a valuable feature to include in your sprint. Anybody have good examples to share about how your team is operating and determining whether there's a return on investment for those features?
That's a good question. We have a couple of different ways. We've experimented with just straight up WSGIF. And however, in the past, we have often, it's kind of back to Matt's point, what he was saying earlier about saying no or actually not saying no. So it's, you know, the customers that kind of scream the loudest, and that can cause issues sometimes, right? With some spaghetti code, customized code, that sort of thing. So sometimes it's not even necessarily worth it. It's just we need to do it to please the customer. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Anybody else raise hands or have comments to talk about how you're deciding features and whether they're going to make money? Okay. So let's come back to research a little bit. I should have had user experience research on this page, so I'll update that. But you know, having done a lot of research, and I put dollars on here because it's the thing about research is it doesn't have to be expensive. The main thing to do is to do research, to talk to the marketplace, to talk to customers, secondary, primary, listen to your sales teams, encourage your product owner to bring back information, invite customers to, you know, your post sprint review. So you've got, you know, panels are good ways of bringing people together. Communities, you know, if you just have feedback communities that you're able to invite people into, it's a great way to engage active customers and users. And then also to think about the decision makers, not just the users, but who is deciding on that renewal? Who is deciding on whether to purchase your product? It may not be the person using it, right? An easy example is if you're using, you know, phones, you know, a child may be using the phone, but the parent is paying for that phone. So, you know, your messaging to the decision maker parent is important. And then it's important that the software actually works for the child. There's a lot of examples around that where, and in the B2B model where somebody's paying for it at a senior executive level, but there's other people using your software. So you need to think about both. And are you able to convey value back to the person who's actually able, who's going to make that monetary decision? Primary research sometimes, and then Matt, I'll go through it a little bit, but if you have some comments here on how you've scheduled how you've kicked off maybe new panel programs where none existed before, because that's always kind of interesting. So there's primary, you know, going out and asking people directly, secondary, reading the reports. And I'll say in our local community, you can go to the lead school and get at CU and get some secondary research and access to some good research. I've done that, and it's helpful to just know what, you know, Gartner or other lead for, you know, Frost and Sullivan, IDC, other research companies are saying that cover your area. So you get resourceful sometimes when you really want research and you want to know what the market and the customer thinks. Qualitative, you know, you're getting ready, you've got ideas, and you just want to run it past messaging. How, you know, what it can be user experience, but you don't always have to get, you know, daunted by full A/B testing, all the best practices. Sometimes you can just, if you can have your product owner or your business analyst get some customers on the phone if the team has a bunch of questions. Say, can you please just go ask a few people? Especially when you're starting up and you may not have a full-time UX person on your team. You just have to kind of figure it out, but it's worth the effort. And then quantitative, you know, sometimes going out with those large studies and putting the money behind it sometimes makes sense to do statistically valid surveys. Net promoter scores, other metrics, other digital measures that you get every day, like how many, well, complaints, or, you know, all of that good, that's good information to bring back to the team. So there's a lot of customer facing metrics that every once in a while, and I would encourage the Scrum Masters and coaches on the call here, that if the product owner hasn't brought customer facing information like that back in a while, that it might be good to just get the teams, you know, give them that perspective of how are the products performing, what is the customer feedback, what are the metrics, maybe the team hasn't seen how well that the features are performing. What are the click-throughs for the feature you developed 6 months ago? So, that's something I think Scrum Masters and coaches can put on their radars to really guide the team to continue to stay customer focused. Matt, any thoughts on like kicking off customer panels or overcoming, mental hurdles when it comes to approaching customers?
Yeah, a couple of things you said there. One, in our business, it's, on the telecom side, it's really kind of trouble ticket generated and oriented, right? When your customers are saying they have a certain problem with feature functionality. So our product management team definitely tracks that to understand, hey, where are the trouble tickets coming in? What are the problems? Is that highlighting some feature functionality we need to go develop or fix to increase the customer satisfaction, et cetera? So that's something we definitely look at. We're sort of in interesting times where our product management team, right, has spent obviously a lot of time at home reading analyst reports, generating product roadmaps, getting new ideas. And actually next week, we're going to go out and do some live face-to-face things with partners and customers. I think that's one thing we really use is just get in front of the customer, or we have a big partner distribution network, and understand what they're seeing. Are they seeing the same themes and trends in the technology? And just because it might be a theme or trend, is there actual, again, a use case that you can develop a feature or functionality to? I think Cynthia said it really well earlier. You might monetize it because, hey, I can sell a new product and make money doing that. Or the overall customer, they spend so much, developing that feature or functionality helps retain that customer longer, helps them renew a contract. And in the short term, there might not be any revenue uplift, but for the relationship of that customer, it's certainly worth doing. And so we sort of balance all those things. But I would say our biggest is sitting down and talking to customers. And we're going to go do it next week, actually, for the first time in a long time, to, hey, we have a lot of these ideas. Are you seeing it? Can you use that? So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that and how our upcoming sprints, how things get prioritized and how it impacts our backlog.
All right. So with customers, there's, the whole point is to be focused on customers and markets. And I guess I'd love to hear more from anybody here on examples where you've gotten good customer input and maybe some things where you think you could have done better. Anybody have examples to share of features that worked or features that didn't? Especially the good ones where you were really proud of the team for involving the customer and the customer loved it.
Sure. Can I share some thoughts, Cynthia?
Yes, please. Is it Srinagesh?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So my challenge here currently is like how quickly we are able to bring the end users, the consumers, the last mile consumers of a product. When I say product, every iteration, every 2 weeks, at least we produce some 4 or 5 user stories. So when I say user story, is some feature, some small feature, small slicing and all. Our challenge is always to get the feedback for every user story from at least some of the end users. So what I request, if you and the team, if you can kindly share some of the best practices for a user story by user story. If a user story is a user story and there is a business benefit, a small feature, small slice of a business complete functionality, so end user will be able to click it and give some feedback or get some revenue or use some data or share some data. What are some of the thoughts based on your expertise? You have a lot of experience in this area. What are a couple of best things to share, get feedback for every user story, if that makes sense?
Sure. So user stories, or if anybody else wants to take it, there's some acronyms out there that help with best practices. I don't know, Katie, Nancy, anybody else want to?
I'd like to ask a question. You mean every single user story? Like if you have a content story, like feedback on that seems really granular. Just curious, do you mean features?
Yeah, user story is a small feature because 10 people for 10 days, they're able to complete some create business impact. There is a business benefit for a end user. You please think of a small features.
Well, I think in this case, it depends on the nature of the user story. So
Yes.
because the topic of our discussion tonight is customer input, I'm gonna assume that it's a customer facing story. Okay.
Yes.
Because
Perfect.
there's technical user stories, right? So this would be a customer facing user story. And then this gets into the basics on, making sure that you've broken that story down small enough that it's achievable and it's understandable, right? So if you're not able to hit your velocity, sometimes complete stories within the 10 days, it could be, and this is where we've got a lot of experts here on the call, but it could be that the stories are too big and need to be further broken down. I don't know, Katie, you have any thoughts on that?
I think that is a good observation that maybe they need to be broken down more. And then I think you had a question on acronyms for helping writing user stories a minute ago. I think one that comes to mind, which you've already mentioned, is INVEST.
Right.
Which goes back to I think, being able to be broken down and digestible and completable.
So Srinagesh, I would suggest you look into that the INVEST acronym related to user stories, and that'll come up quickly. And that could be a potential tool to help. And then, yeah, just make sure that, when you're writing out those stories, that the confirmation and the definition of done is achievable also, right?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Cynthia.
Of course. Okay, so back to the Scrum framework, or we can picture the SAFe train in our minds, because this tends to be a comforting thing. We can come back and everybody's like, oh, okay, here's where I'm at in the software development process. So it's back to the product owner. That is we say the customers provide input to the product owner. That's what it says here. I mean, Srinagesh, what I like about what you're saying is everybody on the dev team cares about it. It is part of customer collaboration. The product owner takes lead on that. As Matt described, he's in sales. He's also had the product management role in leadership and as an individual over the years. So he knows the importance for sales leadership to ask salespeople to bring that input into product owners. And, our Scrum coaches, our Scrum masters and coaches, if the team hasn't been engaging with customers in a while, or bringing research in, or just hearing from customers in some form or fashion, through the product owner or directly, then I just encourage you guys to get that on some sort of schedule to make sure it feels more direct. Okay, because every day, if you're working on user stories that are customer focused, you've got UX research going on, you're working with actual users, you're talking with sales, and you're meeting with actual customers at occasional points with sprint reviews, then, it'll kind of be like breathing. So, and I know breathing, it hasn't been that easy through our pandemic, but wishing everyone, a lot of customer focus and good times rolling out successful products and services.
I was trying to think if it was breathing like the bottom left picture where everybody's smiling and breathing well, I guess they don't look so natural, but natural-ish versus the guy that's underwater that looks much different.
Right. Well, the point is you need to be able to breathe, whether you're taking a deep breath or you're having to struggle to breathe. We all need to be able to breathe, and it's sure nice to breathe easy, right? So I don't want to carry it too far, but I want to thank Matt for taking time out of his busy week to spend with us and in collaboration with me. And I want to thank all of you for participating. Please reach out. If anybody's looking for work, I understand that journey at different times, and I'm part of this community for several years. So I'm happy to help anybody to be a sounding board as you're, going through your career, or even if you're not, if you just are looking for somebody to bounce things off of, you have ideas for where you want to go in your career. I'm always open to listening and helping out.
That's awesome, Cynthia. Thank you. And Matt, thank you too.
Sure.
All right, Katie and Nancy, thanks for hosting us.
Thank you. It was
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really great information and a topic that we don't often hear about. So I think it's important. It was important for you to share, and I appreciate everybody who attended. And and thanks again, Cynthia and Matt, for the information. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great.
All right.
All right, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.